Hello and welcome to In the Court of Wenton Knave. It's a big moment, big moment. We are doing Red. There it is. This is the 40th anniversary edition. I haven't got the Road to Red yet. I previously had the definitive edition and the 30th anniversary, both of which I stupidly gave away. So this is the version I've got. It's the one with a couple of bonus tracks. So that's pretty cool. The original album sounds much the same, unless you put the 5.1 versions of the stuff on. So you know. I thought I'd start with a quote with a bit of Fripp. Here in the Lark's Tongues book, actually, he's talking about what would the Rite of Spring have sounded like if Hendrix had played it, etc. The interviewer says, had you ever thought about how well it might be received in America? They're talking about Lark's Tongues in Aspic. Fripp's opinion is that it wasn't. And he talks about a promoter turning the power off to one of their gigs in '74. But he says, there were those who looked towards Crimson, but it was really after the release of Red. After Red, Crimson was viewed in a different way in America. Red was very influential on a number of American musicians. And Crimson was better received in Europe up until Red. And between '74 and '81, Red's musical effect had more in America than Europe. So this is, according to that, really saying, Lark's is the European one and Red is the American one. They've moved in that direction. I see it as part of the flying brick wall thing and what had happened live. They became heavier and everything, and now it's still Stravinsky plays Hendrix, or Hendrix plays Stravinsky. Sort of. It's lost the chamberiness to some extent, and it's heavier and louder and etc. And obviously Kurt Cobain's favourite album or whatever, or he said it was the best album, I don't know whether it's his favourite, because it is very, very good. Obviously it's a defining moment. I think it's considered more so than Lark's, and the difference is whereas Lark's doesn't feature isn't very well recorded, doesn't feature the best versions of the songs, this does, really. I mean, obviously there's some fantastic versions of Red live which are still to come. Because of course they never played it live because there was no tour. Because when they got to the studio, Fripp declared to the other two, because remember Cross is out, we'll talk about that in a minute, he was going to withhold the passing of his opinion. What? Bruford being Bruford says, well, I thought maybe he meant withhold the passage of his opinion. Now he says he took a neutral position, which is a different thing. I think that expresses it better in that he felt he was just going to let it happen rather than trying to force things to happen. Obviously people saw it as moody, it's Fripp being moody, etc, etc. God, he's such a moody. But he discovered J.G. Bennett and all that stuff. I'm not going to attempt to go into that because I know nothing about that stuff at all, other than that I am a basement dweller. I know that. And you have to remember, 69-74, Fripp spent all that time fighting to keep Crimson, fighting the flying brick wall, fighting druggy John Wetton, wanting to go in that more commercial direction, which became UK, which became Asia. Not only that, they decided to add a player from the 1969 lineup to rejoin the band. Someone who'd left because he didn't like Fripp's music, or the way Fripp played his music, Ian MacDonald, I shall talk about in a bit. And supposedly he sat in the drum booth playing and sort of didn't say anything to anyone, etc. And actually, the engineer remembers this differently. And actually, for Red, he was out of the booth recording anyway. So whatever. Of course, this is the album to feature the album version of Starless, presented by John Wetton, obviously with lyrics by Richard Palmer James, to the band, to no response. They just didn't respond. They didn't say they liked it, they didn't say they didn't like it, they just didn't say anything. It's a typical non-communication thing. We're all guilty of that. Fripp had mentioned to Palmer James about the need for some epic music, epic ballads, that kind of thing. And we know Cross and Fripp wrote some of the chords, and I believe Cross wrote the melody, and Bill wrote the heavy bass bit. And I can believe that. I get the impression Bill writes things on piano. I'm guessing really, but that's the impression I get. That's the kind of thing he writes. I always got the impression he wrote the riff to Siberian Khatru on Close to the Edge all those years before this. Only 2 years before this, but it's so different. So yeah, Cross is gone. Fripp wanted to tell him before they recorded the album, and he was outvoted. I think Fripp wanted to tell him during the tour, and they didn't want to tell him until after the tour. And they got to recording the album, they still hadn't told him. No one told him. He didn't know he was out of the band. He's on the record. He's not on the cover, the terrible cover of the three of them. It doesn't make any difference, does it? He's on it. He wrote some of it. So the fact that he left the band by this album doesn't mean anything, does it? I don't know. Maybe it did in terms of royalties or something. But he's got writing credits, so on 2 songs, obviously. And he's absolutely crucial to those 2 songs. He's not crucial to Red, you could argue, which is fair enough. Obviously, it's a very different sound to Starless and Bob Black. Much, much better recorded. It's the most well recorded album of the 70s by King Crimson. I'm not, some of them aren't particularly well recorded. Island is very well recorded though. Lark Songs, I don't think is well recorded at all. Red is fantastic. It's always sounded good. It didn't need a remix to sound good. It always sounded good. One of the reasons for that, though, is all the extra musicians, which do nudge out Cross a bit, but he's still crucial. So, you know, the fact that he's gone, I mean, technically so is Wenton. Wenton's gone as well. He doesn't come back. Never again. So it doesn't make any difference, really. I think John Wenton wanted a more sort of showy player, and what Cross brought to the table was this delicate thing, which was so important to all these fantastic live things, particularly the improvisations. You know, would be nothing without that violin. Well, it wouldn't be nothing, but it wouldn't be the same without that violin. I mean, Fripp did say, you know, the violin is not an instrument of heavy metal. Maybe that's the direction they've gone in. So maybe this type of music, it's less suited. Whereas saxophone is much more suited, and it's heavier, more your schizoid man type thing than Lark Songs type thing. Maybe. Apparently, Bruford thought he should stay though, and obviously, as I said, Fripp wanted to tell him and was outvoted and said they shouldn't tell him. And it was only years later that Cross actually found out that Fripp wanted to tell him and couldn't tell him, etc. And that was E.G. that did that. E.G. are mad. This thing of lying to the musicians for no reason, it makes no sense. I mean, obviously, during the tour, they really might flounce, ruin everything, you know, but why not tell him now? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it is the seminal moment. It captures the thing better than Lark Songs, so you don't need lots of live versions, although sadly there aren't any, which is why it's the one. And I think because it's Americanism as well, it had a big influence there, obviously. All the live stuff makes the studio albums less definitive, though. That's the point. And particularly Starless and Black, obviously, becomes less important because you can go away and get live versions of things. You've got the whole Copenhagen show with Starless and Black on it, you know. So Red is kind of protected from that a little bit, but still, it is less definitive because of all these live things. You kind of need all of them now. You need all of it. All this here, you need all of that. Bill Bruford is on fire on this record. It is fantastic. I think the style here was what he'd found in King Crimson, and that's the style he settled on for the rest of the 70s. Obviously, one of the things he did was join Genesis, and people would say, well, he's obviously not playing like that on Genesis, but something I noticed, it's Pittsburgh 76, which is a soundboard, which I don't have, obviously, because they haven't released it. I don't think it's the encore, or maybe it's near the encore, where Bill comes in, and for quite a long time, he's playing a rhythm, and it sounds like talking drum. You can sing the dun 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 over the top of it, and then Phil Collins comes on and says 1 o'clock and time for lunch. So he is playing like that, even in Genesis. But certainly his solo albums and UK very much have the sound of this. But on here he found a broken cymbal in a bin, which had this fantastic sound, which is just wonderful. It's on Red and One More Red Nightmare, and of course, first time it's so well recorded. You know, as well as so well played, everything, the planets align once again for this one. So as I said, Ian MacDonald is back. Just to make things even more confusing and stressful. Let's have him back, even though he didn't want to be there, but now he does want to be there or something. And I think suppose it's John Wenton that asked him back, and maybe that was the final straw for Fripp. He thought to deal with that again, you know. But he wasn't just a session player on here. The plan was to bring him back as a full member, so there'd still be a full piece, and obviously it would be a lot heavier with a saxophone instead of a violin. Which sounds great on paper. You know, it's one of those lost things in time of imagine what that would have been like. It would have been even better with Cross as well, though. It would have been a bit of a cacophony. You know, and there would have been a need for certain band members to grow up and allow space for other players. You know, that imaginary lineup would have been wonderful, I think. But John Wenton also asked Mel Collins back as well. He obviously saw the commercial potential in bringing people back from the past, from all the eras kind of thing, and crowning it off. Obviously what they may not have realised was it was going to be the last album, so it fit perfectly. And the endless thing of whether I prefer Ian MacDonald or Mel Collins goes on. You know, Mel Collins is such a fantastic player. Maybe he's not, because he's not much of a writer, or maybe he's a writer, I don't know. But he plays some fantastic stuff on here. But Fripp went back and got Mark Charrigan, Robbie Miller as well. So even they're on it as well, and that really adds to the sound of some of it, particularly things like Starless. In some ways it's so short. It's just as long as the other albums, but it's only 5 songs, and it's not enough. You know, you wish the album was longer with all these players and all this going on. There just isn't very much of it. What there is perfection. It is perfect in so many ways. Probably talk about, well, there's one point where the lyrics are, but only a little bit. It doesn't really matter. I don't listen to the lyrics anyway. There's also an unnamed cello player on there. No one can remember what his name was. Just a session player. I mean, it's the first ever looking back point. The music doesn't look back, but obviously getting those people in brings this continuity to it. So it was a natural ending. Maybe it made it easier for Fripp to pull the plug. I don't know. And had they carried on, would it have been as good? Would it have gone in that more commercial direction? Maybe it was inevitable that Fripp couldn't fight against it forever. And you can imagine a kind of heavy UK with saxophone, with the lighter Ian MacDonald songs as well, which would have been alright. I don't think it would have been as awesome as this stuff, and not as good as Discipline. It's all hypothetical, obviously, anyway. And actually, wouldn't it have featured Eddie Jobson into the mix as well? So that's another thing. Song number 1 is Red. Oh yes. This song that works so fantastically live, of course, was never played live until 1981. So the live performances belongs to another era. It's a heavy thing. It's a heavy riff. I suppose the way to define it from what we've already talked about is that it relates to Larks 2, but it doesn't relate to Fracture. So there's none of the arpeggio-y stuff going on. There's nothing that intricate. This is bludgeoning stuff. Heavy fire. Very definitely King Crimson, in the way Schizoid Man is definitely King Crimson. And it's important as all of those songs. And interestingly, obviously the 80s band played it, and were the first to play it live, obviously, and did some of the best live versions of it. That's kind of what's missing from the 80s band in a way, is the heaviness, the riffiness that isn't there. The riffiness is the jangly 80s sound of the 80s-ness. Maybe that's why they played it, I don't know. Really bafflingly, Bruford didn't like it, or didn't get it. He didn't think they should use it. But Wetton did like it, so they went ahead and used it, but Fripp said, well, if Bill doesn't even like it, he shouldn't get writing credit for it. So this one is credited just to Fripp, because he wrote it. Quite right. Although, it turns out, Easy lied to him, and they didn't do that. They just ignored him again, and did it anyway. And it was years later, I think it might be the 40th anniversary, but maybe it's the 30th anniversary, where they could actually get that fixed. It might be the 40th, actually, when none of the legal stuff was finally sorted. Now, the thing about this is, though, if Michael Giles gets schizoid, because he didn't write Schizoid, but obviously what he did on the drums is part of the song. Surely Bruford gets Red. It doesn't matter if he understands it intellectually. If he obviously emotionally he understands it perfectly, and did something so fantastic with it. It's the drumming is such a key to it. So yeah, Red is awesome. The quite middle section, there was another middle section that they didn't use, which ended up on Vroom Vroom. Track 2 is Fallen Angel. It's the classic melancholy second track on so many albums. It's that thing. Just like with One More Red Nightmare, the bits of it were around for a very long time, right the way back to the Zoom Club and maybe before that. You can hear them play bits of it in Easy Money, actually, in the Zoom Club gig. There's bits of acoustic embellishment. I believe it's the last time Fripp played acoustic on a King Crimson record. It must be. I mean, it's surprising it goes this far. But obviously fits into the song and is done perfectly, unlike Circus, where he's just it's just completely over the top, everything going on all at once. The last Fripp acoustic. Lyrics, there are controversies with the lyrics. The lyrics are a bit jarring. I'm not bothered about that at all. And we've certainly heard worse in the land of prog. And track 3 is One More Red Nightmare. Never played live until 2014. Can you believe? I suppose the question of why they never played older songs or not is one that's not actually been answered, really. The obvious answer is, well, the people there didn't play on it, or only one person played on it, or only two people played on it. It makes more sense to play stuff that everybody played because they know it. Or maybe it's Balloon and these songs don't suit his voice as much, and maybe they do suit Jacko Jaspi more than Baloo, or I don't know. We don't really know, and obviously the fact that they played all the new stuff every time is a wonderful thing. And we have, my own experience of it was Heavy Construction, where they're playing all this new stuff, and the only thing that survived across that to that year 2000 was stuff from the previous album, from Thrack. Only 3 songs from Thrack, and one from Vroom. And obviously John Wetton did play these songs in his solo stuff and whatever, so they were the only live versions, and King Crimson didn't play them, but they did play Red, maybe it's because there's no vocals. Obviously that main theme had been around right since the Zoom Club. We heard it again, the Golden Walnut from Toronto. Not played like it's played here. Here it's just wonderful, and again it's the Bruford drumming, and it's that cymbal as well. I mean, Bruford reckons that is a unique sound, and that maybe you would have to sample it to use it again, because it's something that's never been heard anywhere else, which is what it's all about, isn't it? Bruford doesn't get a writing credit again, even though he's got that fantastic stuff going on. Used a found instrument, and that's the question mark, because he just owns it. The drumming on this track is just so fantastic, and also the sax playing is so good. Out and out classic. Fantastic vocal performance. You hear John Wetton, as we know him, is defined on that song, I think. And there's the Fripp arpeggio bit, which is a pain to learn because it's not very predictable. And Ian MacDonald is on it as well. So there you go, that's good as well. Goodness me. One of those things that, that Ian MacDonald was just killing it, and the tape ran out. They did a clever thing. Rather than doing a disappointing fade or something like that, what they did, they had a bass note dying out, and they actually flipped it round so it goes... And that's the end of the first side. Which brings us on to track 4 on the next side of the record, is Providence, which we've already talked about, obviously. This is the edit of it, so it does cut out, but the bit after it wasn't needed. They chose exactly the right point. But I mean, the violin performance on there is so fantastic. He wasn't always that good on the tour, but with the record we have of what happened, it seems balmy. He was in the band. He wasn't out the band at all. He is in the band. He's there playing. And he's got writing credits. Wonderful. Providence is fantastic. It's up there with Starless and Bubble Black. And it is the perfect intro to Starless. It kind of follows the same pattern as Prelude, Song of the Girls and Islands. For me, this is so much better than that stuff. It's such a bigger deal than that stuff, though. And here we go with Starless. King Crimson rarely did epic. Epic is not a thing that they really did, which is strange because with the original band they did. You had Epitaph and stuff like that. You had Court of the Crimson King, we had Lizard. But this is the first one for a while, and it's kind of the last one, really. I don't think there's anything really epic later on. I don't think you could call Deception of the Thrush epic, really. It's not the right description. And it's only 12 minutes, that's the thing, and so much happens in 12 minutes. So yeah, the song that was greeted with awkward silence is here, the final song of the 70s. As I've said, I'm not worthy and shouldn't be reviewing this stuff at all. So I've got a Sid Smith quote. Sorry Sid Smith, sorry. It's only a little one. The bleak abyss of personal loss was never more chillingly represented. The Crimsons is there. By his biography, it's brilliant. It's about the end, amazingly, and it wasn't intended as the end. It is about the end of a friendship. It's a kind of the end of a band. But intentionally, it's about the end of the 60s, the end of that period of music and that period of the counterculture, whatever that was, and whether it was actually a thing, and the realisation that perhaps it wasn't really a thing at all. Maybe loss of innocence, etc. It is profound. It is really profound. It really does that. And the fact that it's the end of the last album of the 70s, and it was never the same again, is wonderful. Ian MacDonald and Mel Collins have solos. So there's no guitar solo, there's no violin solo. That's absolutely fine because the sax solos just kill it. To be honest, they are utterly fantastic. You have to remember, it's not just melancholy or sloppy. Oh, it's the end, sadness. It's brutal as well. This is the end. When you think about what's already out, The Lamb was this year, Physical Graffiti was this year, Dark Side was the year before. Fripp knew it was over before he jumped. When he said, time is over for dinosaur bands, which I think he coined that term of dinosaur bands in '74. The Beatles had already done their best solo stuff, and the Rolling Stones had already turned into a retro band, a self-parody cartoon of themselves, and etc. etc. You can talk about Hendrix is dead, blah blah blah. Fripp knew it was over. I think that's really significant. Before he announced leaving the band or anything like that. At the denouement, that quiet bit that I've talked about, where live Bill would just be all over the place, just going, but not being in time or anything, and Fripp would hate it. Mel Collins replaces Fripp, and it is utterly wonderful. So King Crimson ceased to exist forever and ever, I think, was what he said. Oops. But he said it was the end for dinosaur bands, and the press didn't believe them. They thought it was a publicity stunt, and it was true. Didn't they hear it in the music? Couldn't they have heard it in the music? So that's it. Goodbye. Finish King Crimson. No, not really. See you next week for Exposure.